Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine stepping back into ancient India, a world, well, vastly different from ours.
Yeah.
We're talking about a time before modern hospitals where, a single really brilliant doctor might travel by elephant to perform what we'd see today as just groundbreaking surgery.
Absolutely. And then woven into this amazing life story, you find these surprisingly practical, sometimes even sort of humorous origins for ancient monastic rules. Rules covering everything, right?
Okay.
From what robes monks wore to like personal hygiene.
It's remarkable how these two uh, threads the life of this incredible physician and these really detailed regulations for a religious order, how they actually come together.
They really do. They converge to paint this vivid picture of early community building. You see how every single rule seems to serve a purpose. Often it's rooted in, deep compassion or just sheer practical necessity. It shows how communities adapt.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into the Cīvarakkhandhaka. It's often called the chapter on robes, and it's from the Vinaya Pitaka. Now, this isn't just some dry list of rules for Buddhist monks. It's more like a living document, something that grew and changed with the community. Our mission, really, is to uncover the whole story of Jiva Cīvarakkhandhaka. He was the Buddha's personal physician, and explore just how his extraordinary life literally shaped the very fabric, you could say, of the monastic world.
Exactly. You're about to discover a hidden depth, I think, to rules you might never have even thought about before. #, the extraordinary life of Jivaka Cīvarakkhandhaka.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story kicks off in this bustling, vibrant city called Vesali. The texts describe it as incredibly prosperous, really populous, because these huge numbers like...
Yeah, 7,000 palaces, 700 palaces, 7 palaces. It goes on like that for houses, parks, ponds. Maybe symbolic numbers, but the point is, it was rich and impressive.
And it was famously home to the renowned courtesan Bapalika.
Right. And this thriving city, Vesali, with its wealth and its famous courtesan, it actually sparked a bit of political one-upmanship, you could say. King Bimbisara of Rajagaha, he heard about Vesali and was apparently quite impressed. He wanted a similar high-status courtesan for his own city, Rajagaha.
Keeping up with the Joneses' ancient India style.
Pretty much.
So this beautiful maiden, Savati, she's chosen for the role in Rajagaha. But then there's a twist, and a pretty challenging one for the time.
Yeah, Salavati gets pregnant. And back then, the social stigma, especially for someone in her position, was huge. So she tried desperately to hide it, even pretended she was really sick to cover it up.
That must have been incredibly difficult. What happened when the baby was born?
Well, in what sounds like an act of sheer desperation, she gave birth to a son. Then she told her slave to take the newborn and abandon him.
Abandon him? Where?
At a rubbish heap, of all places. Just placed him in a winnowing basket and left him there.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It is. But then, something remarkable happens. Prince Abhaya, he's on his way to the royal court, and he discovers the baby. He finds him surrounded by crows, but, incredibly, the baby's still alive.
Wow.
And the prince, showing real compassion, takes the child straight to the inner palace, arranges for him to be nursed and properly cared for.
So he's saved.
Yeah.
And that's how he gets his names right.
Exactly. He was called Javaka, which means something like lively or he lives, simply because he was found alive against the odds. And he was also called Kumarabaka, meaning nourished by the prince, because Prince Abhaya took him in and raised him.
What an origin story. Being found on a rubbish heap and raised by a prince, that definitely sets the stage for an extraordinary life.
Mm-hmm.
So Shivaka grows up in the palace, but he seems to have had a very realistic view of things.
Yeah, the text says he realized royal families are difficult to support without a skill. He knew he couldn't just rely on the prince's patronage forever.
A very practical assessment. So what did he decide to do?
He decided he needed to learn a trade, acquire some real knowledge that would let him stand on his own feet. He chose medicine.
Which makes you wonder, as you said earlier, what was medical education like back then? Where did he go?
He traveled to Takasila, that's Taxila, which was a really famous center of learning in ancient India. Think of it like a major university town. And he spent 7 years there, studying intensely. The texts really emphasize his aptitude.
How so?
It says he received much quickly, retained it easily, understood it thoroughly, and what he learned he did not forget. Sounds like the ideal student, really. He wasn't just cramming, he genuinely got it.
7 years is a long time.
Yeah.
So after all that study, How did his teacher test him? Was there like a final exam?
Oh, there was. And it was a truly unique one. The teacher gave Cīvarakkhandhaka a spade.
A spade.
Yeah, spade. And told him to wander around Takasila for a yojana, that's maybe about 8 miles or so, and bring back anything that is not medicine.
Anything that's not medicine.
Yeah.
That's a mind bender of a test. What's the point?
Exactly. It wasn't about listing known remedies. It required this incredibly deep, holistic understanding of nature. He had to assess everything, plants, minerals, soils, everything, for potential medicinal properties.
So how did he do? Did he bring anything back?
He came back empty-handed. He reported to his teacher, "I wandered for yojana around Takasila, and I did not see anything that was not medicine."
Incredible. He saw potential use in everything.
Precisely. It showed he'd mastered the essence of pharmacology and natural science as it was understood then. His teacher was clearly impressed. He declared, "You are educated, Cīvarakkhandhaka. This is enough for your livelihood." That was his graduation.
All right, so Cīvarakkhandhaka's qualified. He heads back towards Rajagaha, but his journey hits a snag.
Yeah, he runs out of money or provisions while passing through a town called Sakata. But maybe a serendipity, because there he hears about this wealthy matron. She's been suffering from a terrible head ailment for 7 long years, and apparently lots of other great famous doctors had tried to cure her.
Let me guess. They took her money but didn't help.
Exactly. They'd taken plenty of fez but completely failed. She was basically given up on.
So Cīvarakkhandhaka sees an opportunity.
He does, but his approach is really interesting. Very confident, almost audacious. He goes to her house and tells the doorkeeper to pass on a message.
What message?
He says, "Tell her, don't give anything in advance. When you are assured, then give what you wish."
Wow, okay. Payment on results only. That's bold. Shows he really backed his skills. Did she agree?
She must have, because he treats her.
Yeah.
And the treatment itself sounds, well, pretty unusual.
How so?
He prepared some ghee-clarified butter mixed with various medicines, and he administered it as a nasal medicine.
Nasal medicine.
Okay, but then the text says this medicated ghee actually exited through her mouth.
Whoa, that sounds intense.
Doesn't it? And there's this little human detail. Cīvarakkhandhaka sees the ghee coming out, and his first thought is supposedly, how stingy is this householder? Bet she'll try and save that used ghee with a rag.
Ha. Even the great physician has cynical moments.
Right. But the matron, maybe sensing his thought or just being overwhelmed with relief, immediately reassures him and offers this massive reward, far from stingy.
How massive?
Well, the text breaks it down. 4,000 coins from her, 4,000 from her son, 4,000 from her daughter-in-law, and 4,000 from her husband.
That's 16,000 coins.
That's a huge sum. Plus, she throws in a male slave, a female slave, and a horse-drawn carriage. Not bad for his first case after graduation.
Definitely not bad. Talk about making an entrance onto the medical scene. So he finally gets back to Rajagaha with this newfound wealth and reputation.
Exactly. And it doesn't take long for him to get his first royal patient, King Senya Bimbisara himself, the king of Magha.
The same king who wanted a courtesan like Vasili's.
The very same. And he was suffering from something called a fistula disease. Apparently it was bad enough that his clothes were often stained with blood.
Oh dear. That sounds unpleasant and probably embarrassing for a king.
Very much so. The text even adds this detail that the queens were apparently mocking him behind his back, saying things like, "Now the king is in labor," or "A flower has appeared to the king," suggesting, bleeding.
Ouch. Royal courts can be brutal. So Cīvarakkhandhaka to the rescue.
Swiftly and effectively. The text says, remarkably, that Cīvarakkhandhaka cured the king's fistula with a single application, just one treatment.
Single application.
Yeah.
For something that sounds quite serious, he must have been incredibly skilled.
It certainly seems that way. His reputation must have soared after that.
I bet. How did the king reward him? Must have been even bigger than the matron's reward.
The king offered him something quite extravagant. 500 women, all adorned with ornaments. Basically a huge addition to his household or harem.
500 women. And what did Cīvarakkhandhaka say?
He refused, humbly.
Refused. Seriously. Why?
His request was much simpler. He asked only for the privilege to attend to the king, the women's quarters, and the community of monks headed by the Buddha.
That's an astonishing choice. Turning down that kind of wealth and status, it really shows where his priorities lay, doesn't it? Even early on.
It really does. A deep respect for the Buddha and the Sangha, already evident. But his medical skills were still very much in demand, leading to perhaps his most famous case.
Okay, you've got my attention. What happened?
Well, the text describes a merchant in Rajagaha, also suffering from a head ailment, also for 7 years. Seems to have been a common complaint.
Maybe something in the water.
Could be. Anyway, this merchant was apparently much worse off. Other doctors had given up, predicting he'd die in either 5 or 7 days. They basically sent him home to wait for the end.
Grim prognosis. Enter Cīvarakkhandhaka again.
Exactly. And Cīvarakkhandhaka, ever the professional, first discusses terms. He asks the merchant, "If I cure you, what would be my reward?"
And the merchant, probably thinking he has nothing to lose,
offers everything. All his property and himself as a slave. Complete desperation.
So Cīvarakkhandhaka agrees. What did the treatment involve this time? Another nasal rinse.
No. This is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, quite shocking for the time. Cīvarakkhandhaka performs surgery.
Surgery. On the head.
Yes. The text describes it quite graphically. He laid the merchant on a couch, tied him to it.
Tied him down. Okay, no anesthesia back then, I guess.
Definitely not. Then it says, Cīvarakkhandhaka split open the scalp, turned aside the sutures, and extracted 2 worms.
Worms. He extracted worms from the man's head? That's, wow, like actual brain surgery.
It sounds incredibly like it, doesn't it? Trepanation, perhaps. And he didn't just remove them, he apparently showed them to the public.
Showed them? Why?
He held them up and said, "See, good people, these 2 worms. One small, one large." Then he explained that the large worm dying would have fulfilled the 5-day death prediction and the small one, the 7-day prediction.
Good grief. Talk about providing proof of your work. It's incredible to think about this level of intervention happening so long ago. It really underscores Cīvarakkhandhaka wasn't just mixing herbs. He was a genuine surgeon.
A pioneering one? Absolutely. But the story doesn't end there. His post-operative instructions were also unique.
Oh. What did he tell the merchant to do?
He asked him, "Can you lie on one side for 7 months? Can you lie on the second side for 7 months? Can you lie supine on your back for 7 months?"
7 months on each side and then on his back. That's nearly 2 years of bed rest. Did the merchant manage it?
He tried, but understandably found it incredibly difficult. And Cīvarakkhandhaka, seemingly knowing this would happen, had a witty retort ready.
What did he say?
He basically said, "Look, if I hadn't told you that ridiculously long time, you wouldn't have even managed to lie down properly for the short time you actually needed."
So it was a bit of psychological trickery.
Seems like it. Cīvarakkhandhaka apparently knew all along the merchant would actually recover in just 3 weeks. The long instruction was just to ensure he rested properly at all.
Clever. And the reward for saving his life and property.
The grateful merchant gave 100,000 coins to the king, maybe a thank offering or tax, and another 100,000 directly to Cīvarakkhandhaka himself.
Another fortune? His reputation must have been legendary by now. Any other major surgeries mentioned?
Yes, one more really stands out. A merchant's son from Varanasi. That's Varanasi.
What was wrong with him?
He was terribly emaciated, pale, sickly, couldn't digest his food properly because of an intestinal knot, some kind of bowel obstruction or torsion, perhaps.
Sounds nasty. What did Cīvarakkhandhaka do?
Another bold abdominal surgery. The text says, he set aside the people, draped a screen, maintaining some privacy or maybe sterility, tied the patient to a pillar.
Tied him to a pillar. Goodness.
Placed his wife in front, perhaps for reassurance or as a witness. Cut open the abdominal skin, extracted the intestinal knot, and showed it to the wife.
He showed the wife the knotted intestine while operating.
Apparently so. Then he disentangled the knot, put the intestines back, sutured the abdomen neatly, and applied some kind of healing ointment.
And the outcome?
The son recovered quickly. Cīvarakkhandhaka received 16,000 coins for that one. It just reinforces this image of him as an incredibly skilled and daring surgeon, tackling conditions others wouldn't touch.
Absolutely. His fame must have spread far beyond Rajagaha.
It certainly did. Which leads us to another king, King Pajota of Ujjaini.
What was his ailment?
He had severe jaundice, but there was a complication. King Pajota had a strong aversion to ghee, the clarified butter Cīvarakkhandhaka often used in his remedies.
Difficult patient. How did Cīvarakkhandhaka handle that?
Very cleverly. Cīvarakkhandhaka anticipated that the cure, which would involve ghee, would likely cause a strong reaction, probably purging. And knowing Pajota had a volatile temper, he planned his escape before administering the medicine.
Planned his escape? How?
He went to the king and said, basically, "Your Majesty, as a physician, I need to be able to rush out and gather herbs at a moment's notice. Could I have permission to use any royal vehicle and pass through any city gate at any time, no questions asked?"
And the king agreed.
The king, desperate for a cure, granted him this complete freedom of movement. Big mistake.
So Cīvarakkhandhaka prepares the medicine.
Yes, and he disguises the ghee. makes it astringent in color, smell, and taste so the king wouldn't realize what he was taking.
Did he-
Very. He gives the king the dose, and then, knowing what's coming next, the intense purging Cīvarakkha immediately makes a run for it.
On what? His horse-drawn carriage.
Even better, he takes the king's own fastest elephant, Padavatika, which was famous for being able to travel 50 yojanas in a day, an incredible speed.
He steals the king's prize elephant to escape. That's audacious. Did the king react as expected?
Oh yes. When the purging hit, King Pajoda was absolutely furious. He immediately ordered his fastest servant to chase Cīvarakkha down.
Faster than the elephant.
Apparently. This servant was named Kaka, which means crow. The text says he was born of a non-human mother and could cover 60 yojanas in a day. Faster than the elephant.
Wow. So Kaka catches up.
He does. He finds Cīvarakkha calmly eating breakfast in Kosambi, quite a distance away.
Cornered. What does Cīvarakkha do now? Talk his way out of it.
He uses his medical knowledge again, but subtly. He offers Kaka a piece of fruit. He's eating an amalaka, like a medicinal plum or gooseberry, and some water.
A peace offering.
More like a trick. Kaka, probably hungry from the chase and thinking it's just fruit, eats half of it, and boom, it immediately causes him to purge violently.
No way. Cīvarakkha drugged the king's servant.
Medicated him, let's say. Cīvarakkha then explains that Kaka will recover, but that he, Cīvarakkha, absolutely will not be going back to Ujjaini. He tells Kaka, "The king is too volatile. I'm not risking my neck."
I can't blame him. Did King Pajoda ever forgive him?
Amazingly, yes. Once King Pajoda recovered from the jaundice, he realized Cīvarakkha had actually cured him despite the dramatic escape, and he sent Cīvarakkha a truly magnificent gift.
What was it? More gold? Slaves?
Something even more valuable in that context. A Cīvarakkha cloth. The text describes it as foremost, best, principal, excellent, and supreme among hundreds of thousands of cloths. The absolute finest textile imaginable.
A super cloth. A fitting reward for such skill and nerve. And that cloth becomes important, doesn't it? Hashtag the physician to the Buddha.
It really does. Cīvarakkha receives this incredibly precious Cīvarakkha cloth, and he thinks, wow, this is too valuable for just anyone. It's really only fit for the Buddha or perhaps a great king.
And given his previous choices, I'm guessing he didn't give it to King Bimbisara.
No. His deep respect led him to present it to the Buddha himself.
A very significant gift. It shows that connection strengthening.
Absolutely. And not long after this, the Buddha himself falls ill. The text describes it as a bilious disorder, some kind of stomach or digestive problem, and he needed a purgative.
And who better to treat him than Cīvarakkha?
Exactly. Ananda, who was the Buddha's devoted attendant, prepared the Buddha for the treatment.
What did Cīvarakkha prescribe?
He administered 3 lotus handfuls of some medicine, and he predicted that each handful would cause 10 purges, 30 in total.
Okay, specific prediction.
But here's where it gets fascinating. After giving the medicine and leaving, Cīvarakkha had this insight, almost like a telepathic thought. He realized, wait, the Buddha will actually purge 29 times naturally. He'll need a bath then, and the bath will trigger the final 30th purge.
He just knew this.
That's how the text presents it. And incredibly, the Buddha, back where he was resting, apparently knew Cīvarakkha's thought and immediately asked Ananda for warm water for a bath.
Whoa. That suggests a really profound connection between them, beyond just patient-doctor.
It really does. A deep spiritual attunement. And sure enough, the Buddha purged exactly 29 times, bathed, and then had the final 30th purge, just as Cīvarakkha had foreseen.
Amazing. So after successfully treating the Buddha, Cīvarakkha makes a request, doesn't he?
He does. Seeing the practical needs of the growing monastic community, the Sangha, Cīvarakkha asks the Buddha for 8 boons. Basically 8 allowances or provisions for the monks and nuns.
And this wasn't just out of the blue, right? There was a specific incident.
That's right. A key trigger involved Visakha, who was a very important laywoman supporter of the Sangha. A really practical issue came up.
What happened?
Visakha saw some monks bathing naked in the rain. Now, maybe this was normal for certain ascetics, but some courtesans nearby saw them, mistook them for a different ascetic group, and apparently made mocking comments.
Oh dear. Awkward.
Extremely awkward and embarrassing for the monks. So Visakha, concerned for their dignity and the community's reputation, went to the Buddha.
And she suggested specific things.
Yes, based on this and other practical needs she observed, she requested special rainy season robes, partly for modesty during bathing, food for monks arriving after journeys, food for monks setting out, food for sick monks, food specifically for those caring for the sick, medicine for the sick, a constant supply of rice gruel, a staple food, and specific bathing cloths for the nuns.
Wow, a comprehensive list covering travel, health, basic needs, and dignity.
Exactly. And the Buddha granted all 8 requests. It shows this interplay between the lay community's observations and generosity and the evolving practical rules of the Sangha. It wasn't just top-down commands, it was responsive.
Okay, so we have Cīvarakkhandhaka gifting this amazing cloth, Visakha requesting practical items like robes. What did this actually mean for the day-to-day life of monks and nuns regarding their clothes? Things must have changed.
They definitely did. You have to remember, initially, the ideal was for monks to be pasukulika,
Meaning,
meaning they wore robes made from discarded rags, stuff they found on rubbish heaps or in charnel grounds. It symbolized detachment from material possessions.
right, the ultimate in renunciation, but maybe not always practical or pleasant.
Exactly. So when lay supporters like Cīvarakkhandhaka and Visakha started offering fine cloths and requesting specific robes, it presented a new situation. The Buddha's allowance for Gahapadakavara robes gifted by householders was a really pivotal moment.
Acknowledging the community's generosity.
Yes, it was a pragmatic response, and the impact was immediate. The text says many thousands of robes suddenly appeared in Rajagaha and the surrounding areas. The Sangha had a lot more clothing options now.
So what kind of fabrics were okay? Did they just accept anything?
The Buddha specified 6 types that were permitted: linen, cotton, silk, wool, hemp, and a blended cloth called chana, basically common available textiles of the time. It shows a move towards practical guidelines once that initial strict rule was relaxed.
Makes sense. But if everyone's getting robes, how do you manage it all? Did they need rules for sharing?
Oh, absolutely. With abundance comes complexity, right? Rules quickly emerged for how to collect donated robes or even the traditional rags fairly. They had to address issues like, what if some monks didn't go to the collection point? What if they went late? What if everyone rushed the charnel ground at once?
Sounds like potential chaos.
Could be. So the Buddha laid down rules. Shares should go to those who actually went to collect, or sometimes to those who waited their turn properly. It was about creating a fair system for resource management, even for rags.
And as more valuable robes came in, they needed more formal roles, I imagine.
Precisely. The practical need led to appointing specific monks as robe receivers and robe storers.
What were their duties?
They had to be impartial, first off, no favoritism, and they needed to be knowledgeable, keeping track of what came in and what was in storage. It really shows the Sangha developing a more formal organizational structure. Accountability became important.
Where do they store all these robes? Do they need special building?
Not necessarily special buildings, but designated spaces.
Hmm.
The Buddha allowed any suitable dwelling to be used as a storeroom that could be a proper monastery building, vihara, a semicircular building,
Yeah.
a grander building, pasada, an attic, hamiya, or even just a cave, guha.
Flexible. What about protecting the robes? Pests must have been an issue.
Definitely. Specific rules were given to protect stored robes from rats and ants, practical problems. And a dedicated storekeeper, Badrika, was appointed for these storerooms. Interestingly, once appointed, it was forbidden to just remove a storekeeper from their position. It shows the role was seen as quite critical for managing the community's shared resources.
Okay, so they had robes, they had storage. What about keeping them clean? Especially if some were still coming from less pristine sources.
Hygiene was definitely a concern. Monks were dealing with dirty, sometimes smelly robes, so practical solutions were allowed. 6 types of natural dyes became permissible.
What kind of dyes?
Things derived from nature: roots, tree trunks, bark, leaves, flowers, and fruits. Basic natural pigments.
And did they just splash it on?
No, there were instructions. Detailed steps on how to boil the dye correctly, how to use an upper hanging frame perhaps for dipping, even how to test if the dye was ready.
How did they test it?
By dropping a little spot into water to see how it dispersed, or even putting a drop on a thumbnail.
Mm.
Really practical, hands-on stuff.
It gets incredibly detailed, doesn't it? Down to the dyeing technique.
It really does. And if you think about the bigger picture, these instructions aren't just about making the robes look uniform or nice. They're about hygiene. Dye could have antiseptic properties and durability, and making the robes clearly recognizable as monastic attire.
They even specified tools for dyeing.
Yes. Things like a proper dye pot, a ladle with a handle to avoid burns, a bucket or trough for the dye, and rules for careful drying, too, using a grass mat or a dedicated robe pole or rope.
And how to hang them.
By the corners, specifically, to avoid drips staining the main part of the robe. Every little detail considered to maintain the resources properly.
Aside from cleanliness, were there rules about the style of robes?
Yes, definitely. An issue came up where some monks were wearing uncut robes, meaning large single pieces of cloth, maybe with long fringes.
What was wrong with that?
It made them look too much like ordinary lay people, blurring the distinction. So the Buddha disallowed uncut robes. Monks' robes were meant to be distinct, often made by cutting cloth into patches and sewing it back together. Penalties were even introduced for wearing uncut robes.
So maintaining a clear monastic identity was important. Did color become an issue too?
It did, especially with a group known as the Chabagya Bhikkhu, the group of 6 monks. They seem to have been the perennial boundary pushers in the early Sangha.
What did they do?
They started wearing robes that were all blue, all yellow, all red, all crimson, all black, all deep red, or all deep brown, basically bright monochrome outfits.
Trying to be fashionable?
Perhaps. Or just testing the limits. The Buddha forbade these solid, bright colors. Monastic robes were generally meant to be dyed a more subdued, earthy tone, often described as brownish orange or ochre, achieved with those natural dyes.
Were other clothing items forbidden too?
Yes, things associated with lay life or vanity. Jackets, turbans, headbands. Again, anything that made them look too much like householders was out.
Okay, so specific fabrics, specific colors, specific style. What about the number of robes? Could monks just accumulate them?
Ah, good question. That became an issue too. The Buddha apparently observed monks traveling with huge bundles, carrying many robes.
Not very practical for wandering mendicants.
Not at all. And the Buddha related his own experience here. He recalled cold winter nights during his ascetic path where he felt the chill. First, he wore 1 robe but was still cold. Then 2, then 3. He even tried 4 robes.
To see how many were really needed.
Exactly. And his conclusion was that even someone sensitive to cold, like himself, could manage perfectly well with just 3 robes.
And that led to a core rule.
Yes, it led to the fundamental Tikavara rule, the rule of 3 robes. This became the standard allowance for a monk.
What were these 3 robes specifically?
1 double-layer outer robe, called the Saga, 1 single-layer upper robe, the Uttaraskoga, and 1 single-layer inner robe or lower garment, the Antaravasaka. That was the complete standard set.
And were there rules about how these specific robes should be made?
Yes, very specific rules. They had to be cut, meaning, as we mentioned, constructed from pieces sewn together, not one large sheet. They should have 7 rough patches, be clearly suitable for recluses, and importantly, not coveted by enemies, meaning they shouldn't look too luxurious or valuable.
The cut and sewn aspect is really characteristic, isn't it?
It is. It also cleverly allowed for practicality. If you only had small pieces of cloth, you could patch them together. Or if a robe got damaged, you could add patches. It was both symbolic and functional.
This level of detail really hammers home the practical and symbolic nature of the monastic life, down to the clothes.
It really does. It's about simplicity, non-attachment, but also practicality and community identity.
So the rule was 3 robes. What if a monk acquired more somehow? Could they keep extras?
Generally, no. The rule against keeping excess robes was introduced. However, there was a bit of flexibility.
Oh, how so?
A crucial exception was made, a 10-day grace period. A monk could hold on to an extra robe for up to 10 days under specific circumstances.
Like what?
The example given is someone like Ananda intending to give a robe to another senior monk, like Sariputta, who happened to be far away traveling. Ananda could hold on to that robe for Sariputta for 10 days before it counted as an illicit excess robe. It allowed time for legitimate sharing and distribution.
That makes sense. A bit of wiggle room for practicalities. Was there also a distinction between robes that were yours and robes that were just extras?
Yes, a very important distinction. There was the concept of robes that must be determined. These are the essential 3 robes that a monk formally claimed as their own personal monastic attire for that period. Then there were robes that could be set aside. Pikapatu, these were extras, maybe held temporarily or intended for someone else, or perhaps a special item like the rainy season robe.
How did that work for the rainy season robe Visakha requested?
A monk would determine the rainy season robe for the 4 months of the rains retreat. But after the retreat, they had to formally set it aside again, as it wasn't part of the standard 3. It was a sophisticated system to manage ownership and prevent hoarding while allowing for necessary items.
Okay, that covers acquiring and managing robes. What about when a monk passed away? What happened to their robes? Did they get buried with them?
No, monastic property wasn't personal in that way. When a monk died, their robes belonged to the Sangha, the community as a whole.
But who actually got them? Were they just put back in the storeroom?
Not necessarily. The rules specified that the robes should be given to the caregivers, the monks who had looked after the sick monk during their final illness. It was a way of recognizing and honoring their service and compassion. The same rule applied if a novice passed away.
That's a really nice touch. It reinforces that sense of community care.
Absolutely. It highlights the communal nature of ownership and the deep importance placed on compassionate care. The Buddha is even quoted as saying, "If you do not attend to each other, who then will attend?" It puts mutual support right at the core.
The Vinaya even talks about good and bad patients and caregivers.
It does. It gets into the psychology of care. A good caregiver, for example, isn't just someone who fetches things. They need to be skilled in arranging medicine, know what's suitable for the patient, be genuinely compassionate, not be disgusted by bodily fluids, a very practical point,
Yeah.
and be able to encourage and inspire the sick monk.
It's about holistic care then, not just tasks.
Exactly, mind and body. Now, other practical issues came up too, like losing robes.
How would that happen?
Well, one story tells of a monk who left his robes folded up in the forest while he went into the village for his alms round. When he came back, they'd been stolen.
Oh no. So a new rule.
A new rule. Monks shouldn't enter a village without being properly attired in their robes. Basically, don't leave your essential gear unattended in the wilderness.
Seems sensible. Were there exceptions? You couldn't always wear all three robes everywhere, surely.
Right. The system showed adaptability. Exceptions were made for valid reasons. If a monk was sick, if they were within the bounds of their designated rains retreat monastery, if they were crossing a river where robes might get wet, if their dwelling was well secured, or during the special Kathina ceremony period after the rains retreat, when some robe rules were temporarily relaxed.
So the rules evolved based on real situations. It wasn't totally rigid.
Not at all. It was a living tradition responding to needs. But they also had to deal with monks trying to game the system.
Ah, like who? The group of 6 again.
Not them this time, but another monk named Upananda Sakyaputta. He found a loophole regarding the distribution of robes after the rains retreat.
What did he do?
He spent the rains retreat residing primarily in one monastery. But afterwards, he traveled around to other monasteries where he hadn't actually stayed for the retreat and claimed a share of the robes being distributed there as well, pretending he was part of their community for the season. He ended up with a huge bundle of excess robes.
That's pretty blatant exploitation of the system.
The Buddha thought so too. He strongly condemned Upananda's actions and laid down a clear rule. A monk could only accept a share of the post-rains robe distribution from the monastery where they actually completed the retreat. Or, if they had split their retreat between places due to valid reasons, they could take a proportional share. No more monastery hopping for extra robes.
Closing the loophole. It seems they had rules for almost every possible way a robe could be acquired or transferred.
They really did. The end of the Cīvarakkhandhaka even summarizes this with what are called the 8 matrices, or grounds, for how robes could come into the Sangha's possession.
8 different ways.
Yeah, things like robes designated for monks within a specific boundary, robes shared by agreement across multiple residences, robes acquired through a formal begging proclamation, robes given generally to the entire Sangha, robes given to both Sanghas, monks and nuns, with a specific note that a nun's share was half a monk's share, robes given specifically to the community that had completed the rains retreat together, robes specifically designated for a particular purpose or individual, or just robes given for an individual monk.
Wow. That is incredibly detailed. It shows a real legal and administrative framework developing, doesn't it? Right down to the last thread, literally. #, outro. So, from the bustling cities of ancient India, King Bimbisara's ambitions, Javaka's incredible surgeries, right down to the specific way a monk should die or store his robe. We've covered a lot of ground today. It's been a real deep dive.
It really has. We followed Javaka's amazing journey healing kings, treating the Buddha, his generosity, and seeing how his life and the practical needs highlighted by people like Visakha directly fed into the nuts and bolts of monastic rules.
It really reveals how even these profound spiritual paths are built on a foundation of very human needs, interactions, and yeah, sometimes even human failings, like Upananda trying to get extra robes.
Exactly, those detailed rules for robes, the emphasis on caring for the sick, the etiquette around gifts, it all points to this incredibly thoughtful, evolving system. It wasn't static. It was designed for the real-world well-being and harmony of that growing community, meticulous governance supporting spiritual goals.
So what does this all mean for you listening? I think it's a really powerful reminder, isn't it? How seemingly mundane details things like a doctor's fee, or how a garment is stitched, or who gets the robes when someone passes away. These things can hold such layers of history, practical wisdom, and huge implications for an entire way of life.
It really shows that uncovering the whole story, like we tried to do today, often means paying attention to those small threads. They might seem insignificant, but they weave together the entire fabric of the narrative.
Absolutely. Which maybe leaves us with a thought to ponder.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What seemingly trivial or overlooked details in your own life or your own community or even just in the systems around you might actually reveal a surprising depth, a hidden history or a purpose you hadn't noticed before.
Maybe it's in those small everyday things that the most fascinating stories, the most profound insights, are actually waiting to be uncovered. Something to think about.